Welcome back to another episode of Drilling Deeper. I'm Kevin Yannick, Editor-in-Chief of Pit and Quarry. Today we're going to be talking about the state of the aggregate industry. And we've also got back with us for episode 29, Jack Kapansky. Jack, we missed you in episode 28. How are you?
Kevin, I'm doing well. Thrilled as always to be back. You held down the fort, though. You did well. I listened back to the episode. It was solid. You know, we've had a couple episodes of me riding solo, then you riding solo, so it works out. It's all good, but I'm thrilled to be back, ready to talk some aggregate.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the state of all things aggregates today, and we've got some guests to do it. But first, let's be sure to give a shout-out and thank you to our episode sponsor.
We sure do love our sponsors. Thank you to the sponsor of this episode, Geologic. Geologic utilizes scientific investigation and engineering design, backed by their AASHTO-accredited laboratory, to provide innovative solutions to the most challenging mining and development issues in a safe, effective, and cost-efficient manner. When it needs to be done right the first time, call Geologic at 770-824-4212. Thank you to Geologic for sponsoring this episode.
Well, again, Jack, today's our episode 29. We're going to be getting into how the aggregate industry is doing. I got into it a little bit at the back end of episode 28. We were talking about equipment and technology in the aggregates industry. And actually, the timing of this coincides with our State of the Industry report for the magazine, as we just put that out. If you didn't get it already in your mailbox or digitally, the digital edition should be available here as we're dropping this on December 3rd. And you should be getting the print copy if that's how you're receiving the magazine. But the state of affairs for our industry, Jack, overall, it's good times. I think in some cases, producers and manufacturers, dealers, they'll tell you that it's great times. It's maybe not the best of times, I suppose, or maybe not necessarily record-setting by any means, but everybody we engaged for our print December State of the Industry report, they had a lot of good things to say about the state of the industry. And for my seat where we're at, I feel like we've had a good run, for the last 4 or 5 years, even coming out of COVID. And then, I was recently for this report thinking back on my entire career. I've been with Pit and Quarry for 12 plus years, and it's been a really good run for our industry. We haven't had like these boom years like we had, in 2006, 07, like in the years leading up to the recession in 08, the big Great Recession. But, we've really made good, steady gains every year, and I think that's kind of what we come to expect every year as an industry.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this year was kind of interesting in talking with producers, manufacturers, dealers. This year was kind of interesting where, you look back at what we've heard from years like 2021, 2022, 2023, even in the midst of COVID, coming out of COVID in 2022, it really felt like these industry stakeholders were kind of, shouting from the mountaintops, like, we're doing great. Like, despite all this stuff, we're really thriving. Industry's doing well. We're busy as ever. We're, getting material out there. We're getting equipment out there. And it kind of felt like this year, it was less of a shout and more of just sort of a declaration. It wasn't necessarily like a whisper, but it wasn't a shout either. So I think this year, you really saw issues like interest rates, inflation. There was certainly a lot of uncertainty leading up to the presidential election. A lot of this stuff, I think, definitely took its toll. But as we've seen before, you mentioned 2008, obviously well before my time with Pit and Quarry, but you mentioned the recession. I started here near the end of COVID, but while those effects were still lingering, and I think it's just another example of this industry being incredibly resilient, being able to sort of come out on top of whatever issues may be happening in the world and globally. And like you said, maybe not a record-setting year, but it seems pretty much par for the course that this industry continues to do well no matter what's going on. And let's hope it stays that way.
Right. I wrote my December column kind of on this topic too, about the state of the industry, and I think you've heard me tell this story before, Jack, but I was in a North Coast Media meeting. North Coast Media is our parent company here at Pit and Quarry, and it was probably years ago. It was when I was newer on the magazine, and I was just kind of giving a commentary on the state of how aggregates was doing and how our readers were performing out there. And I said, yeah, things are recession-proof in the aggregate industry, and people were looking at me like, what do you mean, like, things are recession-proof? Like, there's no such thing. Like, people have down times, people struggle. That was probably me putting my foot in my mouth as a younger manager or leader or whatever around the halls here, which I probably do more times than not.
I was about to say, good to see some things haven't changed in all that time.
Right. But I guess the greater point I was trying to make was that maybe this is why we've seen these slow but steady gains every year, is because, the demand for infrastructure out there, it's not going away. It hasn't gone away. If anything, there's more demand, more need for construction materials, for roads, for bridges, for buildings out there than we've ever had. Our population is growing. And, we're moving around. Certain regions are really taking off. Other ones, that may be quote unquote stagnant are still, steady, because our infrastructure as a country is essentially, at a C- grade. I think the American Society of Civil Engineers has said that, in their most recent report, that, our infrastructure is below the average of where it essentially needs to be. And because of that basic fact, I mean, that's kind of why we've seen producers year after year, including here in 2024, continue to perform at good or great levels. And we do have some special guests today who are going to kind of relay some of these points to you out there today. We talked to some equipment manufacturers of late. We're at the Mine Expo show, and you've heard some of our interviews from the late September trade show from different exhibitors who are out there. And we've got 5 more interview guests for you today who are going to kind of share their input, as manufacturers on where things are. And I think it's always interesting to talk to the manufacturers too, Jack, because I know, one, they're not the producers, but they have their pulse on a lot of different producers, because they're basically trying to touch the entire market, with equipment. They're trying to work downstream with the dealers. And so the dealers obviously have a good sense of how their, more local, regional markets are doing. So, I think what we're going to hear today is, a good totality of how the aggregates industry is doing, not just nationwide, but in Canada, because we've got some guests who are going to touch on that market here as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think those manufacturers, like you said, are kind of in an interesting and beneficial position where, obviously as a producer, you might work with your local dealer to get your equipment, or if you're getting it straight from a manufacturer, you're kind of working with them directly. But with manufacturers, they're seeing both ends. They're working with suppliers, they're working directly with producers. They know what producers want. They're able to take that input and directly put it into their product, hopefully. And ultimately, that's just sort of a cyclical thing, a chain reaction to, hopefully, if done correctly, to produce more material, better material, makes producers happy, makes everybody more money, which is obviously good as well. And I just want to go back to something you mentioned just now. And again, I know we kind of give you some flack still for the recession-proof comment, but I mean, if you really think about it, it's like you said, there's always going to be a need for infrastructure. It's not to kind of oversimplify it. Aggregates is not a Chipotle bowl for lunch. It's not, it's not a new handbag. It's not a luxury. It's something this country needs in so many different ways. So it's not something that you can just go without. So I think to an extent, I sort of jestingly will agree with you that, maybe there is some recession-proofness to the aggregate industry, because it's something that is just such a necessity. It's like the old saying, if it's not farmed, it's mined. So it's, I think it's going to be good to hear from everyone we have today. We got a good selection of interviews, and excited to hear what they have to share.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, Jack, we've got 5 guests on tap. Again, the interviews you're going to hear in just a moment took place at Mine Expo 2024, and we had 5 manufacturers join us in our Pit and Quarry booth out there. So in the order you're going to hear them here today, it's going to be first up Gary Baldwin of Regal Rexnord. We've also got Jim Chamberlain of Philippi Hagenbach to follow. Third, Stefan Giraudon from Montebear. Kirby Klein will follow. Kirby's with Masaba. And to close us out, Karen Thompson of Haver and Boker Niagara. And again, at the show, there were agri producers there were mining companies there, sharing with them kind of the states of their companies and their interest in wanting to buy equipment or not. And, that's a good indicator, the CapEx state of our readers' companies, Jack, on how people are confident-wise, how healthy companies are, if they're willing to put money out there. And so that's kind of a running theme that you'll hear from some of the conversations today. But again, we're going to hear from Gary Baldwin first here, and we'll kick it off with Gary.
How would you characterize the business environment right now surrounding mining and aggregates?
Being from Canada, our mining industry is full-blown still, going head flat out, and we're really extremely busy. The aggregate industry in Western Canada, we're still getting record number of homes built, so the aggregate industry it's still growing or performing extremely well because of the market and the demand for new homes and infrastructure. There's no doubt that it's going to be a good year at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Mm-hmm. What are maybe some global national factors that you're keeping your eye on that relate to the health of the mining and aggregate industry?
The mining industry, I think there's a lot of, there's different parts of the mining industry. In Canada, we've got from coal mining to copper, gold, fertilizer, diamonds. So I think each one of those has its own different direction, let's say, or different perspective on where the market's going. I think coal is obviously starting to fall apart because I think we're starting to see more environmental issues with coal-fired power plants.
Right.
So the coal-fired power plants are becoming less and less. We've got, in Alberta alone, I think we've got 3 that have just closed.
Wow.
Because, and they were coal mining, so that part of the coal mining business is gone. In the same respect, there's still coal mines we've got who develop coal to go overseas because it's high thermal coal, so it generates a lot of heat.
Yeah.
I think iron ore is kind of falling a little bit down right now. And you know, the other big thing for us is fertilizer, which is potash, and that market is because of the demand from other countries that people are moving from farming into cities and getting different jobs. I think there's more of a demand for fertilizer and more of a demand for a product that is heavily made in Canada. And globally as well. I think fertilizer is made everywhere, but the potash part of the business, Canada is a large chunk of it, and that really focuses its growth based on what's happening in the rest of the world. And as people are moving from farms to cities, you've got to grow crops quicker, so there's more fertilizer needed.
Yeah, absolutely. What's maybe your outlook, or how are you feeling going into a new year here soon?
I think the end of 24 is probably going to be a bit of a challenge. You know, we've got a lot of things that we've got to complete and get done. I think 2025, everything I hear says that we're going to be, you know, probably kicking off to a good year. I'm pretty excited about it, and if I'm not, I'm in the wrong job. So I mean, you know, I've got to be excited about making things happen next year, and I think we're definitely, I think 2025 is going to be a good year.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. How would you characterize the business environment right now surrounding mining and aggregates?
It's very interesting right now because when you look at, we'll just say on the mining side, when you look at coal and you look at gold, they're almost two polar opposites. Now that being said, we continue to mine record levels of coal every year, so that's encouraging. I know we're exporting a lot of it, right. But the demand for coal is there, but their challenges from a regulation standpoint, from a permitting standpoint, are just continuing to increase and increase. And then from some of the hard rock side, I think how do we strike while the iron's hot? How do we produce as much as possible? And that's a good thing. And obviously international pressures. Right. I mean, if China's flooding the market with whichever material, or Russia's doing this, or whatever country, it pays. There's an effect to the price, and that affects the ability to invest in new equipment, to invest in expanding sites. So it's definitely a little bit of both, but at the end of the day, I feel the industry is very strong, and I feel there's huge growth coming in the industry, and on the aggregate side, but also on the mining side. Yeah. So we are very optimistic in our discussions with our customers all over the country and really all over the world. We're very optimistic. We're seeing very good trends of people replacing fleets, people saying, hey, with my existing fleet, we're ready we've got to get more out of it. So how can you help us get more out of it? So we're very bullish on both markets. So.
Excellent. You know, you kind of hit on China, looking at sort of a global scale. You know, you mentioned sort of the impact that might have. Obviously, it feels like we're kind of at an inflection point with the election coming up. You know, everything that's been going on with interest rates and inflation seems to be sort of a positive trend in there, but obviously not out of the woods yet. What factors are you keeping your eyes on most as it relates to the health of mining and the aggregate industry, you know, globally, nationally, so on? Yeah,
and I think the election is a big part of it. I mean, either way it goes, it could have huge impacts. So we're not endorsing any party, but
100%.
But we are endorsing production. We're endorsing obviously. So the election is definitely a big one, and we hear from some of our customers that we're ready to make this investment, but they're kind of waiting to see how that plays out, to see how large of an investment they make. We have several sites that we're talking to, several customers we're talking to that are trying to expand, trying to get permits approved so that they can expand. The material, the resources are there. There's plenty of resources, but it's just the jumping through the hoops and going through the red tape, and that's important. But how can we streamline that process to make that as efficient as possible? So I would say the election is a big one
For sure.
The obviously interest rates come into play in a big way. I know there was a big Fed cut, which hopefully that helps out, and we'll see how that continues to trend over the next several months and years. But there's money available, and the government there's government funding available, but how is it being allocated, and how is it being distributed? How is it getting to the point where we can start digging, essentially? So that unfortunately is out of our control. But as long as the trucks are running, we'll be there to support and make sure they're as efficient as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of mentioned a little bit ago that you're feeling pretty bullish about how things are going.
Definitely.
What's your outlook for 2025?
Like I said, we're feeling very optimistic. So we've had a couple very strong years, and I think that trend is going to continue. We've been fortunate. I mean, from our standpoint, we've expanded our capacity because we knew additional demand was coming. So we've been able to expand our production capacity to anticipate that, to make sure that we can keep our lead times, because we know when the money is available, it needs to be spent. But then when the money's spent, they need the equipment on the ground running. Mm-hmm. So no one wants to sit and wait for a year for a truck to get up and going. So we anticipated that, and so we have the capacity to continue to expand. So we see a strong 2025. We're very excited about where it's going, and that's across the board. So obviously, we run from really any off-highway haul truck, so from a small articulated truck up to a large mining truck, but across industries too. So we do aggregates, we do mining, we do waste, we do steel mills. So really across all the industries that we serve, we feel excited. We're excited about that demand and that trend. So I hope to sit here with you in not 4 more years, but to be able to say, hey, next year, hey, we were right.
How would you characterize the business environment right now around mining and aggregates?
Well, so it's still very solid. I mean, we play on the global scale in the mining and aggregates world, and 2024 has been great, still very strong, but there is also a mixed feeling, I think, going on in some issues that we're facing still with supply chain, for example, or kind of geopolitical issues that may not really help us in the next couple of months. So no, for sure, it's been a good year, very strong. We believe it's going to continue like this, but no, can't complain. Can't complain.
You mentioned some of the stuff going on, some of the geopolitical issues. Obviously, we have an election coming up. Just what kind of things are you keeping your eye on as it relates to the health of the mining or aggregates industry as we wrap up one year and head into another?
I mean, for us, on the long term, what we look at is really all regulations. There is so much going on right now. There is a lot of mining restarting in Europe, for example, with a lot of regulations and restrictions. So that's one thing that for sure we really watch. Of course, again, on the geopolitical side, you mentioned the elections and also all the things going on around the world. It's always impacting us. China is a big market for us, and that's also something we're watching closely. So those are going to be the challenges for sure, So all the regulations going on in our industry that we have to deal with, and also all the geopolitical issues that we may see in next year.
Absolutely.
A little bit of uncertainty for next year. So.
Yeah, no, and that kind of leads in perfectly what I'm saying. You mentioned a little uncertainty next year while still feeling, kind of positive about this year. Just, what are your expectations for mining and aggregates going into 25? Obviously a lot at stake, a lot at play.
Right. So, I mean, long-term perspective, we know the market's going to remain strong because of the demand for electrification, digitalization. So it's going to be okay, for the next 10, 15 years. But we always go through those cycles, and for sure next year we think it's going to be a little bit more challenging. So probably flat or minus a little bit. So yeah, we'll see some of the demand for material may decrease a little bit or slow down in some markets. So we'll see, but maybe not as strong as this year. So that's our expectation.
How would you characterize the business environment here in 2024? Kirby, what's your experience been?
So, since COVID changed our world, obviously, right? It shut us down in Con Expo. In 2020, we didn't get to, have the last day. Nobody knew what that was going to do to the industry. I don't think anybody ever expected it to make our industry explode. As a manufacturer, we were living in a 12 to 20 week delivery. And that was not, we weren't out of the norm. That's where most people sat. In 22, 23, we were pushing, 60 weeks, 52, 60 weeks, and people were still buying. And it was just a crazy thing. And that, I call it the toilet paper syndrome. People bought because they were afraid they couldn't get it. And that went as far down as even me buying my stuff for my products that I sold. I had to ramp up my inventories, which made every business that supports our industry just explode.
So where are we on that meter then? I mean, has it kind of come back to normal where it was pre-COVID?
It's getting back to better deliveries for sure. It's I think most businesses have adjusted their business and how they do business to have a longer lead time. So how we reacted pre-COVID in the 12 to 20 week window, we didn't have as many demands put upon us. Now it's like we've got timelines of 4 months out, we don't do any changes, right? Before we were never 4 months out.
But now that's normal in a way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So now we're back into that probably 24-week delivery time, which is a comfortable time for us, and it's more comfortable for our customers.
Is that the new normal? Would it take some other catastrophic, crazy event to disrupt the rhythm of things right now?
Oh boy, I hope not. It would probably take something catastrophic. I don't know that anybody wants to have that. I think there's, the comfort level is, what your business kind of sets up for. And if it's, 16 to 20 or 20 to 24 weeks, that's what you try to target, and you try to, run your sales based off of that.
Because of the overload or the over-purchasing, however you want to characterize it, Kirby, in the early 2020s, is there going to be a slowdown with CapEx in the coming years because people over-ordered, overbooked what they needed and have on hand? Or what's the nature of buying, I guess, going to be like in the rest of this year into 2025 and beyond, if you have a vision of that?
Well, I think I do. I mean, historically, election years are slower years for manufacturers in our industry. So we all kind of knew that going into it. I think we had a little bit of another level of challenge this year, and that was, as I said before, 22, 23, were banner years, and, we sold a lot of standardized equipment those years because we had to be able to deliver to our dealer base, and that we just kind of focused on that. I see 25, 26 being more in the custom or semi-custom realm of equipment.
What is introducing to your product line, the custom work, having the standard products off the shelf ready to go? I mean, what are the challenges you have as a manufacturer trying to accommodate an evolving marketplace like that?
I think the biggest challenge that a lot of people are going to see with custom is that means it's heavy engineered, right? There's just when you have a standard product, you have minimal engineering that has to go into it because it's been a repeat product. With custom, it could be so close to the last one we did, but so far off. And
even the finest details could throw it outward a little bit.
Oh yeah, it could add weeks to the engineering schedule, which adds to your delivery schedule, which adds to your purchasing schedule. It's all a derivative of the engineering and getting that done so you can actually order what is required.
What's driving the custom interest for producers and end users? We've heard about custom as kind of a trend here for 2 or 3 years plus. I guess, where does that come from?
I mean, I can speak to my company on that.
Sure.
And that would be, we're more known as a portable manufacturer. And the custom side to us is going to be the stationary. We also are seeing people getting bigger on their equipment that they're buying. They want to be able to produce more, or they want to have a capacity so they don't run as many hours. It kind of goes back to the labor force again. The employees are really demanding what they want, and and if that's 40 hours a week, that's what they're getting. If it's 32 hours a week, that's what they're getting. Manufacturers have had to work around those kinds of schedules. I mean, there's some businesses out there, not in our industry, that are paying people daily, right? And that's a real big challenge, but that's what some people want. And it's rolling into our industry as well with, the demands of, I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I only want to work 30. Or I want to work 4 days a week. And I want to have my 3 days off on the weekend or whatever. Those are the challenges that we're faced with, is trying to work around that and find the people that you can, that are willing to adapt, and then we kind of adapt. There's definitely a meet in the middle with a lot of these people.
Kirby, maybe just one final question, but just your feeling on the mood out there right now. I mean, are you optimistic about where things are going to go next year? Getting a little more cautious, perhaps?
Actually, no. I think 2025 is going to be a killer year. I think it's for our industry in general, it's going to be a killer year. There's a lot of projects out there. Again, we talked to the election year. Our industry waits for the election to be over. Doesn't matter who it is who gets in there. They just become okay with it, right? They might not like it, they might love it, but they still end up spending their money on new equipment because they have to keep up, or they're running a piece of equipment that's running itself into the ground and giving them more downtime than they would be happy with.
Yeah, we've shown, I guess whoever's in the White House or however Congress is structured, that, we can succeed no matter the structure in Washington. We can overcome the things that we thought were problems at one time. So,
yeah, I would agree. Like I said, they just have to accept it, and they need that time to do it.
Yeah. Well, Kieran, let's talk a little bit about the business environment surrounding mining and aggregates right now.
Sure.
I feel like we've been on a very good run as an industry. I'll speak for Crushed Stone Sand and Gravel, and our publication. Just hearing from our readers year after year, it seems like we just continue to perform. We've seen our readers, producers, your customers, their volumes dip a little bit, but their pricing is up, and they're finding new ways to make money. But as you're talking to customers, whether at Mine Expo or elsewhere, how would you characterize where your customers are at today? I guess where would you say manufacturers are today? I mean, are you guys optimistic and comfortable with the environment as it is right now, and what might you like to see change?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see a little softening in the market slightly right now. I would say, is it pre-election perhaps driven a little bit, where we often see that cautionary note of spending, but I have to say overall 2024 has been a very good year. Working on the backlog of going into 2025, of course you always have to keep that funnel full. We are not seeing anything that is alarming for our business, that's for sure. The people that we're visiting, I mean, we were talking to a lot of aggregate companies in particular that were looking at either upgrading or replacing equipment that was older, expanding in new plants. So I don't feel that there is, you do hear rumors about, I think we're on the cusp of a recession, but we really are not seeing that. People are spending. I think that there are a number of policies that are being put in place to encourage capital investments as well, whether it's oh my goodness, I'm trying to think what I was just reading about. There is some policies that are actually reclassifying products that are for fertilizers as a necessary mineral, so this gives more awareness to these type of industries. So it's not just aggregate, but of course everybody's using the products that we are displaying here at Mine Expo, whether it's excavating industrial minerals or gold or whatever it is. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Havern Boker Niagara has a presence in U.S. and Canada. I mean, you oversee North America for the business. What are the differences right now? I mean, what's the leader in the clubhouse at this point in time?
I mean, let's face it, in Canada, we're so close to the U.S. that I think that we're impacted by everything that happens. The economy is so much larger. The driving forces behind it certainly impact us as a, let's call it, big brother in the Canadian market as well. But we even talking to, our competitors, friendly competitors, we're finding that they're very optimistic in their business as well, especially in aggregate. In this region, in California, whenever we're talking to them, they are having also very, very good years. So I don't think this is something that is strictly related, obviously, to Hover, but I think that across the board, I did detect optimism in the people that we were talking to at this show.
Karen, coming to trade shows like this one,
Yeah.
Mine Expo or Econ Expo, other ones, is it comforting too? Does it give you kind of some foresight, knowing the next 6-12 months what they're going to look like? Is that one of the things that as an exhibitor that you kind of get out of the show?
Definitely. We're always looking for that feedback, and you can tell by a tone. If many trade shows you hear a lot of, well, we're not sure, we're not investing now, we're not ready to pull the trigger. And I think this show did feel quite optimistic in general, if I had to say so. Yeah.
And maybe just to back up, to the early, coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
Again, some high-performing years, some good years for aggregates.
Yeah.
Does it surprise you that we've sustained success as an industry, for the better part of, I guess, 5 years to this point? Like you said, everyone always, you come to a show or there's an election coming and people worry about some crisis or event transpiring that's going to take things downward. But we've shown some resilience and we've been pretty steady for
since then.
Yeah, which surprises me to a degree, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all realized coming out of COVID there was a lot of government incentive programs for road building in particular, things like that, where they were spending money to make money, let's say. But that has not been maintained this year, that's for sure. But we're still seeing that the trend continue, which I think is a very positive thing. It does surprise us as well. I have to say, we've talked about it, that you think coming out of a slump like like COVID, you kind of get a peak and then it levels off again. And we've really seen the business continue in a very good form. So it's encouraging.
Well, thanks again to all of our guests who joined us at Mine Expo to share their insights on the state of the aggregates industry. That, again, was Gary Baldwin of Regal Rexnord, Jim Chamberlain of Philippi Hagenbach, Stefan Giraudon from Montebear, Kirby Klein of Masaba, and lastly, Karen Thompson of Haver and Boker Niagara. Thank you all five for getting together. And, Jack, as we kind of touched on at the outset here of this episode, the state of the industry overall, the way people are feeling about things out there for aggregates is very positive. There's things that we're watching. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, inflation and interest rates, and there's probably always going to be something out there that we're a little bit concerned about. And I think that's when people are cautiously optimistic, and that's okay. But I think overall, people feel really good about 2024 and how this year kind of stacked up, and considering where we are coming out of the presidential election, there's a lot of optimism about what 2025 can look like, as well as 2026 and those years beyond, Jack. So I think, again, 2024 kind of strings right in with some of the years that we had prior, not record-setting necessarily like we saw in 22 and 23, but another solid one to kind of add to the ledger.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think thankfully for the industry and really in a sense for the country, a lot of the issues that were on hand in 2024 are seemingly starting to normalize. Interest rates have come down, I believe, 75 basis points since the third quarter. I think the first cut was in September, and then there was a cut in early November, 50 and 25 basis points apiece. So that's down 75 basis points. Inflation's down to, last I saw, I think about 2.6%, still a little above the Fed's target rate of 2%. And obviously the election's over. So I think a lot of that uncertainty that came around who was going to win the election, now that we have a winner, now that President Trump is forming his cabinet, I believe Bill Duran and Margot Lopez, our safety columnists for Pit and Quarry, sort of talked a little bit about what MSHA might look like. And I know Nick Scala, the safety columnist for Portable Plants, looked at both MSHA and OSHA, what they might look like under Trump 2.0. So it really does feel like you said, 2024, good year, not a record-setting year, but you listen to some of these interviews, and I'm sure you've heard similar things in talking with producers and manufacturers, but there does seem to be a whopping amount of optimism that 2025 could be a record year next year.
Yeah, I think the presidential election or any presidential election year is something that's obviously going to garner a lot of attention. And I think it was Masaba's Kirby Klein who kind of reflected on the idea that producers are going to proceed one way or another, whether it was Kamala Harris who was elected president or Donald Trump who was elected president for the second time. And everybody was collectively holding their breath, up until November 5th or whatever the day was, Jack. And, that day comes, we have an outcome, and we proceed. And basically what Kirby had kind of said was, we're going to go forward with either plan A or plan B. And no matter what, I mean, there's going to be CapEx money put out there. You've got to proceed one way or another and do business. And kind of like I said at the beginning, infrastructure is needed. And in order to build things, you got to have materials, you got to have aggregates. Our industry, I think we've told this story and heard this narrative through COVID. Like, we're essential. At the beginning of the program, you were talking about, other industries, like the retail industry and, wants versus needs. Well, we kind of need infrastructure at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You need housing. I mean,
you need roads, you need bridges.
yeah, if you want to have a healthy, vibrant economy, the number one economy in the country, you got to have ideally the best of that stuff. And fortunately right now we've got a lot of federal money coming forward that's supporting infrastructure. We've got, more states that are putting forward additional money to support roads, bridges, and highways across the U.S. And we also are seeing, the residential market, and it's local. I mean, in some areas it's better than others, but, there's some optimism around that. There's optimism around the non-residential market, because of data centers and some other sectors of non-residential that are going to be thriving or driving that category. So, again, I don't think things are perfect. I think there's probably still going to be some things to watch. The economy, there's always something to watch, I suppose.
Exactly.
And I think I'm kind of curious, just reading what economists say, what's going to happen with inflation in 2025. But again, all in all, it seems like things are doing pretty solid out there. And, if you're listening and you're a producer, I'm guessing that you're in a pretty good spot and you feel good about where you're finishing 2024 at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to kind of, I'll put a bow on it on my end. You talk about what Kirby mentioned, how it said, he pretty much said, no matter who's elected, we got to still go out and operate. And that's kind of a double-edged sword. It's sort of the good thing is, no matter what happens with an election, no matter what's going on with interest rates, no matter what's going on with inflation, you still got to go out and operate. But the bad thing is that no matter what happens, you got to go out and do it. So it's all about the ability to adapt, the ability to sort of adjust what you're doing. And if there's any industry that's able to do it, or it has shown that they were able to do it over the last several years, it's the aggregate industry. So I have no doubt that no matter what gets thrown at them in 2025, they're going to take it on the chin and come out ahead.
I think another indicator, Jack, that kind of conveys that the industry is doing well at this point in time is, actually, as we're shooting this episode today, we just got word from Summit Materials and Quikrete that Quikrete is acquiring Summit for $11.5 billion. This is a story that kind of stretches all the way back to October, at least in the news, because Bloomberg originally reported that these companies were engaged with each other. At the time, Summit had responded with a company statement saying they weren't going to issue any comments unless they were otherwise legally obligated to do so. And so then the Wall Street Journal, in the last several days or last week plus, I suppose, Jack, they kind of came forward and said that according to people close to the situation, things were proceeding, the talks were advancing, and here we are, we come in today and we hear this news that the Summit is being acquired for what I assume is a record number. I was looking back, trying to get a sense if anything had ever beaten this deal. And, I know inflation numbers have changed over the years. I was thinking about the Florida Rock Vulcan Materials deal from 2007, and that's going back 17 years, and that was a deal that actually went down in 2007 for $4.6 billion. So I don't know. I'm not very good at math, but that's probably pushing or on par with this deal, I suppose. But in modern terms, $11.5 billion is a lot of money. We've seen some big deals, some major mega deals come forth in the last couple of years. And, they're in the couple billion dollar territory, and those are big deals. This is an $11.5 billion deal. And I guess, again, it's an indicator that people feel good. They're willing to put forth some capital at this point in time. And if you're going to go forward with this sort of thing, you got to be confident to a large degree and feel like now is a time to strike.
You hear about the Summits, the Vulcans, the Martin Mariettas that are acquiring or merging with other smaller companies, sort of absorbing them, and you sort of look at them as almost this Mount Rushmore, if you will, of these public producers. So to see a deal go down in which one of those sort of icons is acquired is just I mean, industry shaking news, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that, because I mean, this is just some of the biggest news I've heard since I've been on Pit and Quarry. So just an insane day.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some big deals. I think this is by far the biggest one, at least in my time. I wasn't here for Florida Rock and Vulcan, but they've got people reaching out to me, like trying to figure out, well, I know about Quikrete a little bit, but what's their interest in aggregates? And, I think probably more of that's going to come out here, in the coming days and weeks, I suppose. But, Quikrete's got a history that goes all the way back to 1940, and the way they characterize themselves is they're the largest manufacturer of pre-blended packaged concrete and cementitious products in North America. So, I mean, obviously there's synergies there, that relate to Summit, and, they see tremendous opportunity in aggregates and ready mix and in cement, which is kind of what Summit has built itself on. And, Summit's, as many of you out there probably know, has a really interesting history, going back to Tom Hill, who we've had on the podcast. If you want to hear our interview with Tom, who's since been inducted into the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame, he can probably give you a little bit of background through that interview on his involvement in Summit and how it evolved and mergers and acquisitions. But again, just to kind of put a bow on the point you were making, Jack, yeah, I mean, exciting times, and I do think that this kind of fits in with our narrative today of the state of the industry, and people feel good.
It's a healthy industry.
Yeah, we saw this multi-billion-dollar deal go down. So I think historically too, I'm not an old guy. I'm a little old, I guess, at this point, but I know I've talked to some of the, some people who've dedicated their careers or been in the industry for 40 or 50 years, and they think about a day and age where these sorts of deals are going down, Jack. The industry didn't operate like this 40, 50, 60 years ago. I mean, even, Vulcan and Martin Marietta have rich histories that go back like a half century or more. In some cases, some of the biggest producers in our industry. But you think about how rapidly our industry has changed, and we've got companies being traded on Wall Street. Summit, of course, was one of them. It's unbelievable the change that's transpired in, I guess, the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're just going to keep changing at an even more rapid level, I would expect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've only been in this industry now for going on or just over 3 years. And I mean, even the time I've seen in that is, so minuscule compared to the whole life of the aggregate industry. But yeah, I mean, as the world changes, so does everything that is a part of that world. So like a lot of the stuff we've covered in the past, we've covered stuff like autonomous hauling. We've talked about other big deals. We've talked about companies celebrating milestone anniversaries, teaser for the next episode. This is one of those things that just sort of makes me stop and think, like, what's going to happen next? Like, what's the next monumental move that's going to happen? How much bigger is this going to get? Because it's not going to stop here. So, like, what's next? It's exciting.
Right. As news people, and I think that's the background that Jack and I have. Like, we came up wanting to write and cover news, write the news. I mean, this is exciting. There's exciting things happening in our industry, and we're always looking forward to being on top of it and seeing what comes next.
That's right.
Well, what else is happening at Pit and Quarry? As I mentioned earlier in the episode, we recently dropped our December edition. You should be able to check that out at pitandquarry.com if you explore our digital editions. That's our December State of the Industry report within. Or look for your print copy by mail, as that should be in your mailbox now or very, very soon. Jack, we just wrapped up the final 2024 edition of Portable Plants.
Yes, sir.
Just in recent days, and you've got a State of the Industry report in that as well. So if you're not familiar with Portable Plants, go to portableplants.com, check that out. You could sign up to receive the magazine. We cover portable crushing and screening. There's a lot of synergies with the publication that you're running versus Pit and Quarry. If you're crushing and screening, I would advise you to check out Portable Plants magazine. Jack, as we're dropping this episode, you're literally going to be at South Carolina Aggregates Association annual meeting.
Yep.
So, if you're down in Columbia, look for Jack. And, in the next couple of days, I'm going to be in Lake of the Ozarks for the first time for the Missouri Limestone Producers Association meeting, and looking forward to getting down, seeing a lot of producers. I just saw the attendee list for that. And, I mean, some of these shows, Jack, because I know you just came back from the Ohio Aggregates and Industrial Minerals Association's annual meeting. But, they're getting bigger. They're getting more interest from exhibitors, both from the manufacturer and dealer side, the supplier side, but also from producers.
Yeah, it's very cool. These state shows are a good time. South Carolina, this will be my second time down there. This will be their, I believe, 4th year under Executive Director Jessica Palmer. She does a great job down there. The show's been growing every year that they've been having it under this sort of new management here. And I was in Missouri a couple years ago as well. You're in treat for a great show. Dan Kleinsorge down there puts on a great show. and they do a good job. So I'll speak for both of us, I guess, in saying that, you know, we love these state association shows. It's a great touch point for not only producers, but also obviously some of our partners. And it's just it's a good way to get sort of a gauge regionally on what's going on within the industry as well.
Yeah, and the fact that these state shows, Jack, continue to grow their numbers both on the exhibitor side and on the attendee side. I mean, to me, like you were just saying, it shows that people want to do business. They're looking to connect and find partners, you know, to do deals on equipment and technology. You know, that's a great thing for our industry. You know, that again kind of reflects the vibrancy and the health, the good health of how things are out there. Just a couple other things to leave you with before we depart today. You know, the Pit and Quarry Roundtable and Conference is coming up January 30, 31 in the Phoenix area, and any producers who would love to join us in the Phoenix area at the Wigwam Resort, we would encourage you to go to pitandquarryroundtable.com. You can apply there or reach out to Jack or me at a state show or otherwise, and we'd be happy to walk you through what that opportunity is. And similarly, we are still, as we drop this, accepting nominations for the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. We'll be inducting the 2025 class in St. Louis in March 2025, and you can submit your nominations at pitandquarryhalloffame.com. So another showdown, Jack.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was episode 29 for you. You know, again, thank you to our guests for joining us. If you want to hear from them a little further, I'd encourage you to listen to episode 28. As you know, we talked about equipment and technology with the 5 guests we had today, and again, appreciate them visiting with us at Mine Expo. Give one final shout out to Geologic. Thanks,
Yes.
Geologic, and
thank you.
And we'll look forward to seeing you somewhere down the road.
See you.